I've never seen a people that refers to itself as idiots. My name is Aone van Engelenhoven. So van Engelenhoven, that's a Dutch name, and that's correct. I have a Dutch dad. I'm a Dutch citizen, but my mother came from Indonesia in the 50s, and she is Leti. That's a small island in the province of Maluku in the east of Indonesia. Here I teach linguistics and Indonesian at the University of Leiden, and my whole research is related to these languages, also the languages of East Timor, specifically Fataluku, because the cultures in this region are very similar to the culture that I grew up with. What is the next thing that you want to know?
Okay. So you mentioned that your mother came originally from Indonesia.
Yeah.
Why did she come from Indonesia?
Oh.
And how did your parents meet?
That's a nice one. So my mother was 12 years old when she came to the Netherlands, and that was on the moment that in the beginning, in 1945, Indonesia got independent, but not the whole of Indonesia. So my grandfather was a member, my Indonesian or my Moluccan grandfather was a member of the colonial army in what was then a Dutch colony, the Dutch East Indies. Now, in the 50s, there was a discussion on the Indonesian Republic, and there was this one part called the Republic of East Indonesia that was independent in, I think, 1947 or something. It was a separate republic, but it entered also the Indonesian Republic, and because of that, my grandparents had to leave Indonesia. That's a very difficult thing to talk about, and I'm not a historian, so probably I should not talk too much about it because I'm not a historian. But what I do know is my mother came to the Netherlands, and she grew up in several places in the Netherlands, and then after that, on a certain moment, she left home and started to work in the south in like a hospital where she met my father, and then they married, and after that I was born. There is a difference between Dutch culture and Leti culture. So Leti, that's the island where my mother's family originally comes from. It's matrilineal, and that turns out to be very, very intriguing in that in Dutch culture, in the old days at least, you follow actually the family of your father. It's patrilineal. But on Leti Island in the old days, it was exactly the opposite. It was matrilineal, so you follow the line of your mother, which made me, for me it was complicated because I would be as Dutch as I was Letinese and the other way around. So I grew up with two languages, Dutch, and in the old days we would call it Malay. We wouldn't call it Indonesian because that was a difficult term to use. Nowadays we just say Indonesian, but in the old days we would say Malay. And I grew up with these two languages parallel. Then when I was 18 years old, so that's in the Stone Age, 1980, my dad told me, like, I want you to go to Indonesia with your mom and find out what this is about this Leti Island, because we don't really know what it is and you want to know, so you go to Indonesia. So I went with my mom to Indonesia, and there I found out that Leti is a separate island close to East Timor, but over here in the Netherlands, specifically in the 60s, 70s, no one would use island names. Everyone who came from Indonesia at that time, the soldiers, would refer to themselves as Ambonese, whereas Ambon is just one specific island. So in the old days, I thought my mom would be Ambonese because that's what she also always told me. So we went to Ambon, and there I found out that there was something wrong there because Ambonese people behave differently from my grandparents. So it was not entirely the same, and I went around the whole island to find out where the village was where my mother grew up, and I couldn't find it. So in the end, I asked my mom, "Where is this village where you grew up?" And then she said, "Oh, I have not been very complete to you. Leti is not a village on Ambon. Leti is a separate island, and it's very close to East Timor, and it's really far away from here. So I'm sorry." Then there was this uncle who passed by from another island, from Kisar Island, who said, "Oh, well, I know people who live on Seram Island, which is very close to Ambon. It's a huge island over there, and there you have a whole colony of Letinese. I'll bring you there so that you can meet them." And when I came there, I found out that the language that my grandparents were using when they had their little secret that the children should not hear was actually a separate language, whereas my mom always said that, "Oh, it's just classical Malay, or it's old Malay. You don't have to pay attention to it. It's just old Malay that old people use. Well, you don't have to know this." And I found out it's a separate language, and on that moment, I was 18 years old. I thought, now I want to know everything. I want to study. I go to the university, and then I learn how to describe this and how to analyze this. And actually, that's what I do until now.
So what language did your mother speak with you?
Malay.
Okay.
She never spoke Leti with me.
But she knew Leti.
She knew, and I didn't know she knew, because when we came back, I had some recordings and I was playing them back. It was on tape, so I was playing them back and I was trying to transcribe them, but I didn't manage to do that. And my mother was playing with my son behind me in the room. And if you play back sound files all the time, that is kind of boring for the one who is in the room as well, because it's the same thing. And I was playing it back and playing it back and playing it back because I didn't really understand what was said. And then one moment I said out loud, "Oh, I know what it means. It means he goes to the store and buys something." I just made that up. And then my mother all of a sudden said behind me, "No, that's not what it means. It means this and this and this and this." So then I said to my mom, "Mom, can you speak this language?" And then she said, "No, I can't. I don't know. I don't want to talk about it." But she could. Otherwise, she could not reply to this. And she said several times when I was doing a transcription, she would more or less repeat or adapt what I've said. So she did. But we have this tradition that if you leave Leti Island, you leave forever. You're not supposed to go back. We have a metaphor for that because it's a very small island. In the old days, if you would have a horse, you could go around in 4 hours. That was it. So if you go, you're supposed to stay away forever. That's what you do. Or you stay and you become a farmer or something, or you leave and then you have to stay away. You can come for holidays or something, but you're not supposed to stay. And so that's what my mom did. They left.
But your grandparents continued to converse in Leti?
Only if the children were not supposed to understand.
Okay.
Normally they would speak Malay because they were with other Malucans in the same quarters, so they would converse in Malay. But then when the two would have a gossip or something, they would speak in Letinese, and the children wouldn't understand what it was about. Except for my mom, because she was the oldest, she could understand. But she learned at home that you were not supposed to speak it anymore.
Okay, and what sparked your interest to know about it? I mean, because it's like your grandparents speak it, who cares? And why did you really want to find out what the meaning was?
Well, I was just curious. In the beginning, I thought I just want to know exactly the language because it sounds really different from Malay. So I was caught by that because I'm interested in languages anyway. But in the end, I found out that was not the thing. What I was really intrigued by was how people from the, as we call them, the people from the little islands tell stories. How they tell anything, fairy tales, epics, history. They do that in a certain way, and it turned out that was actually what I was really interested in. When I was a little boy, I would hear my granddad tell a story, and then he would use all kinds of things to a table leg or whatever, or just would use something like this, and then he would tell the story. And that was very specific, and I'd never seen something like that with my Dutch friends. Their parents or grandparents would not do that. So I was really intrigued by that. And then when I was there in Indonesia on Seram, a lady gave me a letter which I thought was written down, but it was not written down, it was sung, because we have a singing tradition. It's comparable to what the Malays do with pantun, these small verses. You use that to say something that you cannot say in normal speech. So this lady actually said to my grandmother, like, why didn't you tell him? Why didn't you tell him? Because he comes here all from the Netherlands to find out how we are. Why didn't you tell him? So that was more or less the song. I went back and then I had to sing that to my grandmother. And on that moment, my grandmother said, okay, from now on, we are not going to speak Dutch. We're not going to speak Malay. I'm only going to speak Litinese with you. So before I went to Indonesia to do my PhD research, I already could speak it. I already spoke Litinese, but it was kind of old-fashioned. And when I was there in the 90s, that usually people would a little bit smile, like, oh my goodness, that's like an old man talking. And I remember that when I came there for the first time in Indonesia in 1980.
So how old were you when you first came?
18. I was 18 years old.
And this was the first time you entered Indonesia?
Yeah, I had never been in Indonesia before.
Your mother never went home?
No, that was because it was a political thing.
Yes.
So actually, if I understand correctly, my mom would never have been back if it was not because of me. I was 18 years old, so I wanted to know things and I didn't know anything, and I was super frustrated. I was super frustrated that because I have a Dutch dad and my mom, well, they would say Malukan or Litinese, and then some people would say that, you're an Indo-Ambon or something, and I didn't know what I was. And then usually my mother would say like, no, that's something else. So I said, what is that? We don't have to talk about that. So I wanted to know, and that's why my dad said, you go, when you're 18, you go to Indonesia and you find out yourself. And it turned out that first of all, it was very warm. Never felt something like that. It turned out that I had a lot of family everywhere. Everywhere where you would go, you would have an aunt or an uncle or a cousin. Or everyone was family. Everyone was in principle very friendly. But then it turned out that you could make a difference between people who were really from the south and people who were Ambonese or something, or people who were Javanese, whereas I never knew that before.
What did people think you were? I mean, because I mean, you have mixed blood.
Yeah.
You.
Well, this is still so I'm a kind of in between. This is the funny thing. I'm a kind of in between. I'm Dutch, or I'm a Dutch citizen. I speak Dutch. But my children would say there's something wrong sometimes with your Dutch, and it has to do with the semantics, not with the pronunciation. That's okay, but the semantics, the Dutch semantics, is not always okay, and the same applies to my Indonesian. Sometimes the Indonesian semantics is not okay, and then colleagues say, well, I'm not sure about this. And that's because I walk in between. So sometimes I go to the left, sometimes I go to the right, and it has an effect on the meanings, of course. That's the thing. And then I found out when I started to study the Leti language that there the meanings are again very different. And that's the interesting part of the whole thing. So in the beginning already, I wanted to understand that. It's always about understanding this. So one of the things that if you're in the middle, what you see very well is the difference between two cultures. So the Dutch and the Letinese culture, for example, sometimes are very different. Has to do with things like truth. Dutch culture is very much on truth values. Straightforward. It's polite if you're straightforward. You can say in Dutch, you get something to eat, and then you can say, thank you very much, I don't like it. You do that in an Indonesian context or in a Letinese context, that's the most horrible thing ever to say. You always say, thank you very much, and you just don't eat it. It's there and people realize that, oh, he doesn't want to eat it. But you never say directly like, I don't like this. Or whatever. You need to have they say in Indonesian, you have to have an alasan. You need to have a reason. So it can be your religion, be your tradition. So I misused that one.
Oh, he's not feeling well. He has stomach issues, yeah.
Yeah, so I have to say I sometimes misuse it on Leti Island, where I got something that I really, 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 really did not want to eat. And then I would say, oh, sorry, but I have a Dutch wife, and in Dutch tradition, men are not supposed to do this and this. Okay, then it's okay. I also did not realize that I had two first languages. I always thought, because I grew up in a Dutch context, that I always spoke Dutch, because everyone spoke Dutch, so I speak Dutch. But it turned out that I did not always speak Dutch with my mom. Now, what was that? That was when I had a sociolinguistic research with a colleague in Australia, Margaret Flory. She told me on a certain moment, you know what your problem is? No, I don't know what my problem is. You're a bilingual. I said, well, what the heck is a bilingual? What is that? That's someone who has two mother tongues. I said, that's impossible, because I thought you have only one. I said, no, I don't believe that. And she told me like, no, well, okay, let me rephrase the question. When you're angry, are you going to explain things in Dutch? I said, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, and is that natural to you? Well, no, probably it's easier to say that in Malay. Oh, okay. When you're happy, you do that in Dutch? I said, well, I'm very happy and have to laugh out loud. Then it's easier to explain that in Malay than in I can do it in Dutch, but it doesn't feel okay when something tastes nice. So when something tastes nice, then it sounds better in Malay than in Dutch. Doesn't sound good. Het is lekker. That's not nice. Wah, enak. That sounds okay. So this was actually the thing. I grew up with these two, but I even didn't realize that that there were two. So when I came back from Australia, I asked someone who I knew from primary school, do you still remember what I spoke at home? And he would say something like, yeah, you just spoke Dutch. If your dad would be around, or you talking to me, you speak Dutch. But then sometimes when your mom would come from the kitchen, you would say something we wouldn't understand. So that was for me actually evidence that I would use both of them. But probably both were not okay. It was not that I was fluent in Malay or fluent in Dutch, but probably not. I'm not sure. But it's something, you have both of them there. And that is the interesting thing. And then it turns out that culturally you have a comparable thing. So this indirectness for me is more natural than Dutch directness. I have to get irritated or something, then I can do it. But if it's just normal, then I have this tendency to, never mind, to go around. I can't help it. It's a natural thing. So it's an educational thing, I suppose. I grew up like that.
Okay. let's get back to Indonesia.
Yeah.
So you're in Ambon, and then you meet this person who tells you to memorize this
Yes.
song, and then you go back to the Netherlands.
I take it back to the Netherlands. So in the plane, I was rehearsing. It's just a small song. I had to rehearse that, and then I came back, and I went to my grandmother, and the first thing that we just arrived, and then my mom just went into the living room because she said, "This is not my thing. This is your thing. I don't want to have anything to do with this." And then I said to my grandma, "Grandma, you have to hear this because I brought you a song. I brought you a letter." That's what I said. I brought you a letter. So I don't know what it means, by the way, because I couldn't speak the language. I don't know what it means, but Auntie, this and this and this, there's a letter for you. And then I had to sing it, and that letter actually said, "Why didn't you tell him anything? He came here without knowing anything." And from that moment on, my grandma said, "Okay, from now on."
Do you remember that song? Can you sing it?
No. No.
Okay.
But then, I sang that, and from that day on, I still remember that my grandmother just spoke Letinese with me, and it was very, very difficult because I wasn't trained in linguistics at all. I was 18, 19. What do you know? So from that day on, I was training until I was able to do that. Then I studied, and then when I went for my PhD thesis, I could already speak it. But it was clumsy. Perhaps it's still clumsy, I don't know. But at that time, it was really clumsy. But when we went there, my wife and I decided to pretend that I could not speak Indonesian. I only could speak Letinese. So they had to converse with me in Letinese instead of using Indonesian. They would speak with my wife in Indonesian, but not with me, because I couldn't. So I would converse in Letinese, and then I could find out, oh yeah, it works like this and this and this and this. And they would more or less tell me, "No, yeah, that's okay what you say," because they're very polite. "Yeah, it's fine, you say it like that, it's okay, but we say it like this," which just means what you say is wrong. That's the way they do. And that was a very good methodology, actually, because it turned out also that during my field work, already in the first week, my recorder broke down. So I couldn't...
Okay, so you get this research proposal to your professor. You go to Indonesia.
Yes.
And then you fly to Ambon. How did you get to Leti? I mean, wasn't it
very...
But it was a very isolated place.
It's very... that was really, really bad. So I went twice. So the first time I went was because my promoter told me, "You have to go there to find out whether the island really exists." So I was really irritated. So of course it exists. I'm here, so it exists. And then my supervisor said something that doesn't mean anything, because you people from those islands, you invent just anything to make sure that you're special. So you just go there. So I went there, and it was there. So I brought him a cloth and everything as proof, like, "Look, this, I've been there." And then I arranged that the year after I would come back with my family. So I arranged a house and everything. And the day after, the year after, we went back, but it took at least a month with the boat, because it's called kapal perintis. So that's a huge boat that goes past all the islands. And in the old days, this is in the 19th of the last century, the south of Maluku would be one kabupaten, from Aru up to Wetar. It's enormous. And you would have two boats going there, one from Ambon through the east, and then down to the west, and then back up, and the other one going from the west down to the east and back up. And you would have two types of, they would call that the southern part, they would call Maluku Tenggara. And you would have two types. You would have Maluku Tenggara Dekat, so that would be nearby Maluku Tenggara, which would mean the K Islands. And you would have Maluku Tenggara Jauh, that's Leti Island, that was really far away. really far away, and it was far because it was very difficult to get there. It could happen that you would go there for 3 months before you would be home. Well, we were lucky, we just had 1 month. Then you would go at Leti Island, and you would not have what we call in Indonesian dermaga, so you would not have a quay, which means that they had to pick you up with a boat from the island. They would go to the ship, and then you go on the boat, and then they take you back. Very, very, very complex. And if you were on the island, you had to wait for the next boat, and you wouldn't know when the boat would come. So they would call every week, is the boat already leaving Ambon? And they would say, no, it didn't arrive yet, so it can't have left yet. Oh, when does it arrive? We don't know. That kind of stuff. It was very, very complex. But the good thing is, of course, that at that time it was really a closed community, because you couldn't go anywhere. You could also go with a sailing boat, but then you depend on the winds. So depends on the monsoon. You could only go once to Ambon because you needed to have the west monsoon or something. Then you could go to the north, and you needed the east monsoon to go back to the south. That was too complex. I think the sailboat would be quicker even. But the thing was, of course.
But how did people plan back then? I mean, if you were be from there and maybe work somewhere else, I mean, or you just didn't have any sense of time, so it just wouldn't. How was the sense of time back?
Oh,
on these
so,
islands?
That's interesting because if you think in terms of time, we think in terms of days, hours, years, months. Turns out that in Letinese, the word for year is the same as the word for wind. So, because it depends on the monsoon, they depend really on the monsoon. If you want to go, it depends on the monsoon when you can go. You still hear until now that sometimes you can't go there because of the high waves. That was very normal. So I was there the first time, I couldn't go away because they would say, the waves are too high, we're not going. There were boats, but they said, no, we're not going, the waves are too high. So, well, you can't go to East Timor, that's really nearby. Yeah, the waves are too high, we're not doing it. Oh, okay. And the first time that, when I did my research there with my wife, we went back through East Timor, and East Timor on that moment was still Indonesian property, and we were actually not allowed. But it's Indonesia, right? So we were not allowed, and then you say, oh yeah, sorry, I'm not allowed. What do I do now? Yeah, okay, take a plane and fly to Jakarta, okay. So, but it had to do with the fact that in Indonesian concept, it's always about family. So when I arrived the first time also, I went back from Leti through Dili, then I would go to Jakarta. The first time I was on a Chinese boat who would go to Dili, and they dropped me before they arrived in Dili. They dropped me near a graveyard. It's called Santana. So you step down here and you go to the graveyard because there's someone from Rote Island. Go to him. You stay with him. That's fine. And then that man will tell the police that you are there. It's much better than if we take the boat and you go to the central part because the police is there.
But Dili was part of Indonesia back then.
Yes, and it was closed. No one was allowed to go there.
But Indonesians were allowed to go there?
Also not. It was just totally closed. It was military territory. So
because Leti is quite close to, I mean, it seems much more convenient. Yeah, right, to go.
Yeah, so well, this is the intriguing part. We call everything Maluku over there. But that's a Dutch invention. It's an enormous region, a lot of islands, but Leti is really, really close to Timor, and culturally it's exactly the same. When I did my research in the Fataluku region in the east of East Timor, it's exactly the same. It's comparable to Dutch and Flemish, so there are some differences, but it's very much the same.
Because it's geographically very close.
It's geographically very close, and before East Timor was closed by the Indonesians, there was contact between the islands and Tutwala in the east. I had someone who helped me out. He already passed away. He helped me out when I was an undergraduate with my Letinese. He told me that when he was a kid, he would go from Leti Island with the canoe. He would go to Tutwala. Then you had to climb up, and over there was a market, and you would see the Portuguese police officer in shorts, white shorts. They're really crazy, these Portuguese, and something like that. So he went there every Saturday. But then when the Indonesians came in, it was totally closed down, and you couldn't go there anymore. But you still find a lot of proof in the region over there that it's culturally exactly the same. It's the main difference is the matrilineality and patrilineality. That in Fataluku, they are all patrilineal, but on the islands you.
Okay, where is Fataluku?
Fataluku is you have Timor. It looks like a cigar, right? Then the easternmost part, the tip of the cigar, they call Lautame, or that's where the Fatalukus live. And in the tip we have this place called Tutwala. And that is, that's actually related to Leti Island and Kisar Island. But a lot of people only know that from the stories, but don't realize that anymore.
And when you went there, you also did research regarding languages.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Okay.
The language makuva, right?
Yeah, it's about makuva. So this is a really cool story. So that was in 2000. It was in 2000. In 2001, East Timor got independent. And you know how linguists are, they try to get in there because it was a moment that you could go there. The Indonesians didn't want you to do that, but it was now in a very difficult time, so you could try going there. So there were a few linguists. One was called John Bowden from Australia and Nicholas Himmelman from Germany, who went there in 2000 looking for a language that they said was a minority language, it was gone or whatever, because we had evidence from 1950, something written by a Portuguese official who went there, who found this language that was not Fataluku, that's the majority language. And since then we didn't have anything anymore. Portuguese wrote about this, but we didn't have that. So in 2000 they went there, and they went to a place called Mehara, and they asked, do you still have Makuva speakers here? And then people usually said something like, no, they're all dead. So the language was considered extinct, and in a way it is. But the thing was that the way they behave, I recognized from my own family on Leti Island. It's exactly the way a Letinese person would go around the question you don't want to answer. You would say something like, I don't know, we've been dead for more than 100 years. It's not interesting, that kind of stuff. My family would say exactly the same. And this was the reason that I wanted to go there. So I went to Dili. Then I took a bus to Los Palos. That was, I don't know how long, a very long trip with the bus with pigs in it and goats and stuff and everything. And then I was in Los Palos, and there was this Protestant minister. I stayed at his house, and I said, I want to go to this place, Mehara. And everyone said, don't go there. It's dangerous. It's not okay. They are wizards and stuff, and they poison you and whatever. But that's the way we talk anyway. My family would say something like that. So the answer to this question is, I already pronounced it. I have to go now. If I don't go, I fall ill, right? I pronounce it. I have to go. Oh yeah, you have to go. So then he took me on the back of his motorbike. He brought me there to Mehara, and then he left me there for I think it was 3 days or something. And then I found out that the speakers were still there, but they wouldn't speak it on a daily basis. They just use it in certain circumstances. It became a kind of Latin, so they would use it for special rituals and whatever. In normal life, they would speak Fataluku, but they still would know it. And I found out because there was a boy of 4 years old who had his birthday, and they're very poor people, so they wouldn't have a birthday every year. So this was his first birthday. He was 4 years old. It was a huge birthday, and the entire village was invited, so I was also invited. And I thought, what should I do? I went there, and then they start drinking a lot, because okay, they drink a lot. And then when these people at 12 o'clock at night, something like that, were totally drunk, all of a sudden one of these men started to say, yeah, this one wants to know our language, right? But we don't know it, right? We don't know. How do you say open the door? And then this one person over there said something, and I thought, where's my recorder? Because I didn't bring my recorder, so I was so frustrated. Well, where's my recorder? And they started.
But did you know Fataluku? How could you distinguish it?
It sounds totally. The intonation pattern is comparable, but it's not Fataluku. You can clearly hear that. It's totally different. And so I got several questions, and I was trying to make notes, and it didn't work out. So the next day I went back looking for this one man with the mustache. And I said, how do you say in your language, open the door? I don't know. I don't know that language. He said, yesterday you said this. I said, no, you've been dreaming. I haven't said anything. So it became a kind of secret language. It was a sacred code, and it took me a very long time before I got into that. And then I found out that the language is still there, but it's now totally adapted to Fataluku grammar. So it's not like an Austronesian language grammatically anymore. And you have this interesting phenomenon that the meanings are changing. So you now I had one very long word. That was also very intriguing. Very long words. Normally you would say, well, that's 2 syllables or something. If one word is 2 syllables, perhaps one, or probably 2 syllables. And then it means something like dog or something. But I had this one lady who helped me out, and it was the women actually who were very much into this. The men were cool, so they didn't have time. But the women, that's fine. You talk with women, and it works very nicely. And one came up with a word like this. And I thought, what is that? That's too long for one word. And she said something like, this word we use if we want to say, if you want to say fishing. So that whole thing means fishing. Yes, but I have this program, it's called Toolbox, and then you can put that in, and then you can learn the toolbox to gloss text. And I found out that actually what they say is a word is actually a whole sentence, which means I step into a boat. But they couldn't parse it themselves anymore. So they would say, well, no, this whole thing means fishing. And so it's more or less memorized. There are more languages like this, but I don't have access to other groups. I only have access to this one because I'm from Leti Island, and therefore, in Indonesian you would say saudara.
Yeah, but how was it? So this your friend where you stayed with, the pastor, he dropped you off in that village, and then where did you go? Somebody invited you to stay at their house?
No, he said, well, I have a friend. The first thing he said, okay, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, and I had to change the story a little bit by saying, if I go back now, I don't have anything. I lose face, right? I lose face. So I got a grant to get here. I'm here now. I need to do this. Okay, are you afraid? I said, no, I'm not afraid. And he asked again, are you sure you're not afraid? I said, no, if I have to die, then I die. Life is like that. Oh, that's the way they talk. So, okay, you die. But don't blame me. I said, no, I won't blame you. So I have this friend over there. I bring you there. It's my friend. You can trust him completely. because the story about Mehara is that they poison you and all that kind of stuff, and it's very dangerous and whatever. So they brought me to that one house, and it was excellent. It was very nice to stay there. It was very nice because no contact, no nothing. It was just in the village with these people, but they wouldn't tell me anything as well. So it depended.
But they were used to foreigners, or they were used to
no. But
they wouldn't consider you a foreigner.
I was the minister brought me.
Yeah.
So
okay.
and he was a friend of the family, so it's safe. But they would ask me where you're from. I say, yeah. Usually, if you would say I'm from the Netherlands, what? What? So because I would speak Indonesian first, then they would say, are you an Indonesian? No, I'm not an Indonesian, but my mom. Then you had to tell the story, and it doesn't really make sense to them because they are very much into East Timorese independence and not what happened in the 50s. So usually I would say, I'm originally from Leti Island. They know exactly what it is because you can see it from there. Say, over there, I'm from there. Are you from there? Oh, wow. And then we have this tradition of them. We have to find out how are we perhaps related somehow. So you have to tell your whole story with ancestors and stuff and what happened. No, we found out, no, we are not. Okay, that's safe. I'm not related, that is safe, and I was brought by a friend, so then it's like an obligation to them to make sure that nothing happens to me. That's the best thing that can happen to you, that you go to a place and you are brought there by a friend of the family. That is very safe. But then in order to work there, you have two options. You can be a total outsider. That's okay in a certain context. Sometimes I do that, but in this case, because the language was like hidden, it was, they say it was not there, but the way they said it, I recognized from my own family, like, no, this is not true what you're saying. If they would say, nah, we've been dead for more than 100 years, and we don't know these things, and it's idiot anyway. By the way, makuva, it starts off with the word makuva itself. The part va, that is from their own language, va. It's like an article. The maku part, that is actually Fataluku, and it means idiot. I've never seen a people that refers to itself as idiots. Nowadays we call the language makuva. I'm partly responsible for that because I wanted the language to have a word actually, or a name. So then I found makuva. There was this Fataluku researcher, Valentin, who also said makuva. So I thought, okay, let's use that word. But when I was in Mehara, people did not like the word. Now I already knew this va part, that's like an article, but the problem was the maku part. Because I thought, yeah, maku, that maku in the makuva language would mean something like old, so it would be like the old one or something, but in Fataluku it means idiot. And actually that's the word that, yeah, the Fatalukus refer to these people over there. Those are idiots because they don't have these Fataluku houses. They don't have the Fataluku culture. They were people who were living in the bush. So they were not really seen as equals. That was more or less so. The people in Mehara, they didn't really like that word. But anyway, so, and then it turns out that you have different clans over there. You have the Fataluku clans, of course, but there are a few who do not fit in. So the clan that I was related to, because my ancestors were blood brothers with a clan in the east. So that makes us what they say in Indonesian saudara. But then you have these few who are where they're from. So some of them, you have stories like this is the cool part in storytelling. Some would say, "Oh, we came from the soil. My ancestor came from the soil, or from under a stone." Whereas the Fatalukus, they all came from outside. They came with the boat. Some came with the boat from the east. And those are the ones, there's one group where I'm related to. But you also had the other ones who came from the west. They came walking from the west. And then you had these few who were already there. And they were kind of pacifist, right? So they had to adapt. So they also put away, they hid their own language. Makuva, they hid that one, and they started to speak Fataluku. On a certain moment, there is this cool story of...
Why did they need to hide their language?
That has to do with, this is my research term is language folklore. In the beginning, I thought the same of the Leti language. My mom did not want to speak it, and I thought she was too ashamed or something, because if you, in a Dutch context, you would say, "Why are you ashamed? Use it, be proud of your language," or something. You have to see it exactly like that. They are so proud of their language that they cannot stand one mistake. They cannot have it that if an outsider pronounces one word totally wrong, then it's even better just not to use it at all. There's nothing worse, also for Letinese, if you speak Letinese and your pronunciation is really, really bad, or you make mistakes in your grammar. It means you don't have control of your language. It's not Budi Bahasa. You don't have control. Don't do it. So that's a typical cultural phenomenon in the region. That I'm so proud of this language. I don't want to pronounce it in the wrong way. Then
it would disappear, right?
Yeah, that's the consequence. Which is it's also a very Western thing. Like if we say, "But then your language disappears," that's bad.
Yeah.
Right. But especially in East Timor, they would say, if it disappears, it is supposed to disappear. If it doesn't disappear, there must be a reason for it. So makuva is still there, but it's no longer a fully spoken language. I asked people, how do you think about this? The question was not understood. How do I think about this? Yeah, if it disappears, it disappears. Yeah, but it's still there, and it's no longer as people are not fluent in it. No, you're not supposed to be fluent in it. We speak Fataluku if we want to be fluent. But makuva is the language that contains our most inner part.
But do they not think in their language? I mean, because
they think in Fataluku.
But that's an outsider. That's somebody else who brought it in.
Yeah.
But they accept that, even though they're not reading too nicely.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, it's also very hard for me to conceptualize that.
So they speak, and they even would say, yeah, Fataluku means the correct language.
Ah, okay.
That means the correct language. So Fataluku people, when they came in...
So their propaganda worked.
Yes, they came in, and that was a story. Like, they came from, I forgot the name of the clan right now. They came walking from the west, and then there was this one clan who started to pacify everything. Pacify, yeah. Just make sure that everyone was below them. So he would attack everyone, and then they would have a fight, and they would win, and then it would mean, okay, I won. You have to speak my language, because my language is the correct language, and what you talk, that's hardly a language. So I had this PhD student from East Timor, and I also asked him, so what do you think about Dutch? And he was very polite. He would go like, so do you like it? It's okay. Well, that's no, it's okay. But he would compare it to, it's like singing of birds. You don't know what it means. And that's because it doesn't have any meaning. Fataluku is a real language because all the meanings are there. So what about this makuva then? And people who are not from Tutwala would say, oh, no, 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 no. I don't want to know that. These are not my meanings. I don't want to know that. That's dangerous. Keep it for you. I don't want to know that. So probably it started off as a kind of politeness not to speak makuva when a Fataluku was there. There is a story that one of my main assistants, an older man, who was actually a Fataluku speaker from the lake, but his grandma was from Tutwala. So he would go there. He told me, as a kid, I would speak makuva with my grandma. And now I don't know anymore. It's a long time ago. I'm in the 70s. I don't know anymore. I feel very frustrated that I don't know anymore because there's a story coming by that I've heard in Mehara that an old lady told me, yeah, we decided to stop speaking makuva. So within a few weeks we were all speaking Fataluku. That this, of course, doesn't make any sense to us. But this story means something. So they decided not to speak makuva anymore, which is comparable to people over here. Moroccan people who speak Dutch to the children, they don't speak Arabic anymore. It's actually, I think it's a comparable thing. And it's still there somehow because it's used for rituals and stuff. And these makuva people, they don't have external things like I don't know, like special clothing or architecture or what. They don't have that at all. So what they would call their lulik, their sacred matter, is their language. That's theirs, and no one should touch it. So it took a while before I was allowed to deal with that, because in the beginning, no, it was not allowed.
But it's the Fataluku that see them as primitive, and then they themselves also see themselves as primitive.
Yes, in a way they do.
And they accept the narrative.
They accept the narrative because they have an other definition of primitive.
Yeah.
They would say, yes, that's true. We came from the soil. The Fatalukus came in with iron, with
because they travel and do trade, maybe. Yeah.
So they had a lot of stuff, and they had an army, and they had castes. So they have a king and nobility and stuff. The Makuvas didn't have that.
What was your impression of their culture?
It's very comparable to Letinese culture. It's almost the same because they do have castes, like on Leti. We everywhere in Southwest Maluku we have that, but it works differently from what Westerners would think. That was something that I learned over there, also on Leti Island. That I thought, okay, so we have caste, right? So we have a king, and we have nobility, and we have commoners, and we have slaves. So that's 4. Then they would say, yeah, except for the slaves, because we buy them and we don't talk about them, but the commoners and the nobility and the Raja, the king, that's what we have. But an old man told me, have you ever seen a fish? So, yeah, of course I have seen a fish. So where is this king of yours? I said, yeah, on top. So he said, no, he's not on top, he's in front. And the commoners are in the back, that's the tail. Without the commoners, the fish can't move. Mm-hmm. The king is the voice, is the face of the clan. It's in front. In the middle, we have the nobility. But then, if the king is not good enough, okay, we put the king in the back and someone from the back we put in front. We change around. So we're just all descendants of the same ancestors. So
not a vertical structure, but...
No.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what... If you use that terminology, we don't even use the term king, right? We called it marna, which actually means the one who breathes. Wusru means the one who is wild. Yeah, of course, the fins have to be wild, otherwise you can't move. And the tail, we call that Aone, children. Those are the children. Yeah, when they grow up, they get another function. It's not really comparable, so the term caste probably is not even correct. Although, if you look at in society, if you are Marna, you cannot marry someone from the lower class. That's totally not accepted. If you do, then you also go down.
Yeah.
You never can marry up, you can only marry down.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know. I mean, I never associated Indonesia with a caste
Yeah,
system.
yeah. We I don't know how that is in the West. Bali has something like that, but I don't know that. But in the East, we do. If you go to Leti, you have it. Kisar, which is a little island further to the west, is very, very strict with that. Even here, they are very, very strict with these castes. Kei also. Ooh, they are very
But for me
strong.
personally, the differences are not so visible, you know.
No, you
whereas,
don't see it.
You have to, whereas in India, it seems to be more of a, you can see, wow, okay.
Yeah. No, you can't see it over there. It's something that's inside.
Yeah.
But everyone knows. Probably they know from the name. They go, oops, this is a high up. And you can even see it in the Netherlands. People know this.
Okay, now my question to you as a linguist, like you said, they didn't not mind losing their language or maybe preserving it in that sense, right?
Yeah.
By not polluting it or by not spreading it to other people. When we look at Indonesia, I think, I believe, and probably the scientific community, that a lot of languages are endangered, right?
Yeah.
So they're losing speakers, and Indonesia is kind of taking over, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe possibly English at some point. But yeah, I mean, it has, of course, positive effects, right? I mean, having a similar language means people are able to communicate better, and you know, you don't put them into that much boxes, because if everyone speaks the same language, it would be harder to separate people, right?
Yes.
But my question is, like, what do you think about it? I mean, is it just a bad thing, or how far do you think it's going to go in the future? I mean, because Indonesians are marrying between the regions. One of them is Sunda, one of them is Javanese. In the end, the child will only speak Indonesian.
Yeah.
This is happening. I see it happening.
Yeah, that's true. That happens. So what will happen from now on, further on, you will see that there are exactly as you say, there are more mixed marriages. However, that's the interesting part. There are no real first language speakers of Indonesian. That's the very funny thing, because of these mixed marriages. So a Javanese daddy and a Sundanese mom, they have also their family, and then the children, they go to the Javanese grandparents, Javanese uncle, so they hear Javanese and they can follow but not fully speak, and then they go to the Sundanese, and it's the same thing. So you get a kind of what we call translanguaging. You have all this language.
True that it
coming
it
together.
does happen, but it also just happens that the languages are just lost. I mean, I know many people, they grow up in Bali and they just don't speak it. I mean, because there's no necessity anymore, because often people will even speak to each other in Indonesian, even though they can speak the local language.
That's true. Why? Because you get detached of this first language anyway.
Yeah. And you think about also as something primitive and as something, that's like my grandparents do that, that's like,
So yeah. So that's true. It's seen as something old-fashioned on a certain moment, and it's only used for identification of your identity. Then all of a sudden it plays a role. Otherwise, not really. But then what you also see happening is that Indonesian is changing very quickly. So Jakartan Indonesian, that's going to be super popular. That's very, very, very popular. I don't really understand that one, because I'm the wrong generation. But you have this new influx of new words and whatever, and also the politeness rules that you have in a language like Malay are slowly changing. Why? Because the world is changing. So the Indonesian language, which is just a variant of Malay, if we want it or not, it's going to change. And you can also already see it happening, because if you would go to Sri Lanka, where they also speak Malay, that's totally different from what we hear in Indonesia, because it's almost Sinhala. The grammar is totally different. The words are still Malay, but if you go to South Africa, it's no longer there.
Yeah.
But they are still Malays.
But even with small languages like Leti, you said you learned it here from your grandparents,
Yes.
and then you went there and you were seen as, it sounds
It
like,
was awkward. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
seen as something. How is this possible? So, but then it turns out I have a specific position within the Letinese and also in East Timorese society, because they see it as why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? Probably he is the one to do this. He is the one to tell us this. That's my function. So you get always categorized somehow in society.
Yeah.
Probably they see that. Well, I know for sure they see that that's my task. Even my mother told me like, yeah. So that you're supposed to do this. But she also, when I did my PhD thesis defense, she also told me like, I don't really think I don't know. Very smart of you what you did, but
It has no use.
no, I said, why would you do that? What's the
Did it
use?
discourage you from your mother? Who?
No, not at all, because I was a kind of disappointed, like, what? How do you mean? And then she said something, yeah, it's just like you are showing something that other people should not have seen. It's ours, but it's not necessary for other people. Why do you do that? I said, no, I want to show how beautiful the language is and all that. And she would say something like, it's ours. It's not beautiful, it's ours, it's not theirs. So they have a different look at things, which is very interesting, by the way, because if I grew up here, so here we have this idea of
Sharing culture.
sharing
right?
culture, or at least exporting something, like
Yeah,
look at what we have here, isn't
Yeah.
that cool? Yeah, and over there they say, oh, this is fine, it's okay, you don't have to know this. It's totally different.
Yeah, that's very different.
It's very different, but it doesn't mean they look down at their own culture. It's rather the opposite. So one of the things is that one of my duties for the Letinese and for the Southern Malucans is that I want to tell them how you can tell stories without being afraid that you do something wrong. Because normally, if you tell a story, people get nervous. Like, you have to say it correctly. If you make a mistake, you die or you get ill or whatever. That's the reason why I've also been told here by young people that I don't want to ask my granddad, because perhaps I asked the question in the wrong way and he get irritated, or he's not going to reply, or I don't know how to do this. Well, that has been my whole track, that I've tried to find out how can I ask things. In the beginning, my mother also did not want to say anything, but on a certain moment I found out, if I ask it like this, then it's okay. Usually on Leti Island, but also in East Timor, they told me like, if you ask once, that's just like not asking anything. Once is not okay. If you have asked 5 times, I have to take this seriously. If you come back 5 times, you have to come back. So I tell you a story, and there must be a part in it that doesn't make any sense to you. If it's not going to be your story, you don't do anything. But if you want it to be your story, you come back like, well, I understand, but this part, can you explain this to me? So that would be like, I would tell you a story about the sword flying around, the golden sword, and it cuts coconuts from the trees and whatever, and you think, oh yeah. If it's not your story, then you think, oh yeah, no, well, it was a story about a flying sword, well, yeah, these people, whatever. But if it's your story, you come back and you will ask, does this sword have a name? Oh yeah, it has a name. What's the name of the sword? The name of the sword is like this. Why is it called like that? That's a different story. So you go away, but you come back again. I want to know why the name of that sword is like this. It takes 5 times at least, and then the person is going to, okay, I'll tell you. It's like this and this and this and this. And there's another story behind it, because in Western society, we have stories are blocks, right? You start like in a book. You start in first page and you read on, you tell on until the final page, and then you close it, and then it's finished. But over there, stories are never finished. There's always a story behind a story behind a story behind a story behind a story, and everything is an explanation for something else. So you go around, it's a whole network. And that's the cultural part. I was totally caught by that. That my granddad or my grandma could also had this aunt who could do this very well. That she would tell you this, and then she would say, "Okay, this is not. Yeah, that doesn't really matter. Everything matters." So, but I wouldn't come back, so then it doesn't matter. But if I would come back, 2 weeks ago you had this story about this and this and this and this, and then you said it didn't matter, but nevertheless I want to know. Okay, well, now let's not talk about it. It takes a while, and then she would tell, "Oh, it's like this," and so you get more information and more information. It's all interlinked. So where I would say Western Indonesia has a very visual culture with architecture and dances and written literature and stuff. Over there, it is it's just conceptual. It's mental. So you have to memorize things, and then you know, for example. So I also at home I have these certain statues, and I use them for storytelling. So because then they all of a sudden they represent someone. Do they really represent someone? No. On that moment that I tell the story, it represents a certain person, and that's a way to memorize the whole story. You can use your surroundings for that. Usually, if storytellers, they would say, "Whoa, this mountain is called like this and this and this," and that's it. If no one asks why is it called like that, that then means for the storyteller, like, okay, this is not his story. Because the storyteller is also like, it's like fishing. He's looking for people who need to know the story. One of the things in storytelling is if you start telling the story, you are not allowed to stop. So if you do not want to say something, you have to find a way to go around it. One of the things is by saying, yeah, but this is not really interesting. It's not really important here. So I want to tell something else. I want to talk about this. The person doesn't come back to it. Then it means, yeah, it's not for him. Or you make an extra mistake in it. Like you tell a fairy tale. That's also when I did my field work. We learn here, you pay your informants, right? You don't pay an informant when it's for storytelling. That is the most horrible thing ever. What you do, you pay back with a story. Oh my goodness. So what story? So for example, I told the story of Little Red Riding Hood. The first question was, Little Red Riding Hood. So, Red Riding Hood. What's that? Yeah, that's a kind of cap. Oh, okay, that's a cap. Why is it red? It's red because it's red. No. There should be a reason why it is red. Why is she called Little Red Riding Hood? There must be a reason for that. If I would say, oh, I don't know, then it means I don't own the story. I'm not even supposed to tell it. That was super intriguing, and because my recorder didn't work, that was the things that they told me. So they educated me as a storyteller, specifically with these things. So anything you want to say, anything, okay, make sure that you have all the information necessary available, but you do not give it away. People have to beg you for that information. And it depends on how they ask that you can give something, but you don't give everything. And the idea is that it's not even possible to do that, because if you have to say something that is not correct, you cannot pronounce the word. That's one of the things. So it's a very complex thing. So I always thought when I was in high school that those islands over there, they're primitive. Exactly, they're primitive. They don't have cool food like the Japanese, and they don't have a sultan, they don't have a palace and nothing like that, and it's small and it's warm and it's nothing there. But this is very, very complex, and my idea now, or I'm sure actually it's no longer an idea, that stories they live in their mind, so they see it happening. One of the things when I was in East Timor, where you have the same cultural framework, when I came, I have a different name, right? In East Timor, they gave me a different name, Sorot Malay, and which Sorot, that's from Surat, right? So that's alone. Malay means something like king, so king of letters. What is that? Turns out there are a lot of these people who are called Sorot Malay. Why? That is a specific person in the epics of the region who went around, and one day he would come back. Why? Because he would go around and find knowledge for everyone, and then he would come and then he would disseminate the knowledge that he had found. And that's what said, well, he came back. I said, oh, that's not it. No. I'm Aone van Engelenhoven. I'm a Dutch citizen. This is my passport. And they would say that has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with it. We see this happening. We recognize the story. We recognize that, therefore it's true. It's happening right now. So I have two different things. I have narration reality versus narrative reality. In the West here, everything is narration reality, and that's where our truth values come from. Like Chomsky with his furiously sleeping green ideas or something. We say, I see it in your face, that's nothing. Why is that nothing? Because you can't have green ideas. We don't have green ideas. But in the narrative reality, we do have unicorns. There's a unicorn, okay. Or you have these horses with wings. We don't have horses with wings. We don't have horses with wings here in the narration reality, but we do have them in narrative reality. So it's two different things. But then you have societies like in East Timor where they just blend. And then it's very difficult, for example, to say this is true and that's false, because in principle everything is true then, or everything is false. But they don't say that. Everything is real. We look at small children, it's also real, right? If you tell a fairy tale to small children, they get into the story, as we would say. They get nervous and everything. Then we also don't say, yeah, but it's just a fairy tale, it's not real. On the moment that you say that, you destroy it, right? So you don't do that. So for little children, it's real. But on a certain moment, we learn in the West, no. This is reality, and that is just made up. And that step, they haven't made that over there.
Interesting.
They haven't made that step. So when I went to East Timor and they were just independent in 2001, that was that question that I said, so you're independent now, and Shanana Gusmao, that's your hero. And I was in Mehara, and they even said something like, so what are you aiming at? So what? You're independent, yeah? So, yeah, but last year, 2 years ago, you were still under Indonesian occupation. Yeah? So that was bad. Yeah, just as bad as now. No, you were suppressed, and yeah, that's true, but we are suppressed now as well. So, no, you're independent now. Yeah, no, well, we are occupied by the United Nations now. So, no, the United Nations is not like that. They say, no, it's exactly the same. So we had now United Nations, then we had Indonesia, before that we had Portugal, before that we had these different things, and it goes around. It's always the same like that. It goes nothing new. So they have a different idea of history. We have a history is past, right? So Napoleon, yeah. Napoleon has been here. But if you have a language that doesn't have any tense, you can't say Napoleon has been here. You can only say Napoleon is here.
In the year X.
Yeah, you have to put in the year. Yes. They don't have Nowadays they do, of course, but in normal speech they don't have this idea. Oh yeah, the Napoleon was here in the year 1800 something. No. The further away the most further away they can get is he was here in the East monsoon.
Okay, but well, that must be changing.
It's going
now,
to change, and there
because of the influence of television and time.
exactly. So what we see happening here, if we want it or not, so you see the observation of Indonesian taking over.
Yeah.
In East Timor, we see Tetun taking over. It's going to happen. You can't stop it, but it's related to television. It's related to technology. It's going to happen. If we want it or not, we get all these influences from outside. So the world is going to change, and you will have in East Timor, I know for sure that already happened in Tutwala. There is a gap between the oldest generation, who only speak Fataluku, and the younger generation, who there we have in the between the generation that speaks fluently Indonesian because they grew up during Indonesian occupation 25 years, and the youngest generation, they go to school and they learn Tetun, and their parents also speak Tetun with their children because they're independent now. So Tetun is going to be the one. What you see happening is that who is going to speak Fataluku? That's the language of the granddad, right? He can't speak Tetun, so we have to speak Fataluku. I asked my dad to translate for granddad. So that's what you see happening. So it's actually the same as what happened with makuva. There you had Tetun shifting up makuva to a higher level. We think in the West like, oh, so you suppress the other language. No, what they do, they put it up. Like Latin, that's also up. We put that in a special register for praying or something. In the Catholic Church, we put it up. It's not putting down. But the effect is the same. You get on the moment. My mother-in-law, she was a convinced Catholic, but she knew exactly what was written down in Latin. Bible books, you could say, well, it's about this and this and this. But if I would ask every sentence independently, she wouldn't know that. And that's actually with Fataluku. I think that's also going to happen. Specifically because it says correct language. And I had this PhD student, a very nice guy, who had always felt a little bit uncomfortable if I would say something in Fataluku because my pronunciation would be very bad. And that's not okay. And you would see it in his face, he would get green, like, ooh.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I told you, the danger is I can talk for hours, so...
Okay.